let's see if I popped up yet or not. I know it's getting ready to go to it, so there we are. All right. Well, folks, it's about a minute till 5 o'clock. If anybody is, I'm just kind of got on there a minute early to see if anybody can make sure you hear me all right and all of that good stuff. So if you are, feel free to enter a comment in the chat box. You got to sign in to chat, but anyway, I'm going to try it right here. Yeah. Let's see here, testing. Yeah. There we go. Test. All right. Well, I got that on there, so we're going to call that good and get going here. It's officially 5 p.m. And for those of you that are joining us here, I'm very happy to have you. Try to keep my eyes on my phone in case there's anything that major pops up. But this is talking about the trapping in the high northern plains. Good, Seth. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. Both of you guys have let me know that it's coming in. This is trapping in the northern high plains. And what does this sign have to do with that? Prayer's the best way to heaven. Trespassing's the fastest. I am Hi Wayne. Very happy you're here. So this is the sign that greeted me on the property that Richard and I trapped. Mark Steck, and he has a whole bunch of video cameras listed. I'll see if I can. He's even got a little old thing here, that shows that 24 hours a day they have it done, but they don't mess around. And there's something about out west. How you doing, Yo Trapper and Paul? Glad to have you guys. There's something about out west where trespassing goes to a whole new level, to the point where you turn down the wrong lane and all of a sudden, boy, I tell you what, it gets pretty hairy, and I'm not kidding you. Mobile stories of guns being pulled out on different trappers, or you just made a mistake. Certainly there's a lot of ass chewings, forgive me, but that's what they are, by you just showing up out west. And it seems to get worse the farther west you go into it. Now, I'm not trying to say they're not good people, because they are, but they do take trespassing very serious. So let's get right to the point. And running the Northern Trap Line, these are the two gentlemen. This was actually Mark Steck's ground, and it was the year Mark had his aneurysm, and he was not in good health at the time. And Richard and I actually, I answered an ad on Facebook, and we're on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. So the rancher leases the ground, and he's a member of the Sioux Indian tribe, but he is a rancher as well. And so with great pleasure and everything, we got a chance to go on Mark's wonderful trap ground. I can't remember the exact number Mark got, but it was, I want to say it was 180, but it could have been 250, but one way or the other, it was a wonderful, wonderful trap line that he had. And this is the 1st of November, this photograph. I can tell you I know it's the 1st of November just by the looks of the wet soil and the wetter coyote and that type of a thing. You definitely want to run, if you're on the big pastures and that type of a thing, having a UTV, ATV is to your benefit. You see that this one's been covered up, but let's get into it. Let's continue on. So when's the best time to go? Let's talk about that. And I think that's important. And this is the very first coyote of our second year that we caught. And that's Richard Johnson. He's the guy who came up with the RJ set. And the best time to go. Well, let's say this, the 1st of November, the coyotes in the northern part of the country, whether you're talking Montana or North Dakota or even South Dakota and We're at the Standing Rock, which is right there at the state dividing line. The best time to go, November 1st. You stand a better chance of having a little bit of ground to work. You can actually run some traps. Pretty easy, knock on wood. Not saying there that it's always that way, but it's not too bad. But if you notice on that coyote how he has a little bit of brown color to him, and that's kind of the big thing for a lot of trappers out there, that by having the snow, allowing the snow to actually be on the ground, you can go ahead and let that snow bleach the coyotes out a lot more. So they'll be bleached quite a bit more. I can tell you this, my experience is the 1st of November coyotes that you catch and skin, you can very well go ahead and roll them up, and they'll fit in a Walmart bag. However, once you get past November 15th, many of your better quality coyotes, you will no longer be able to roll that hide up and stick in a Walmart bag. They put on a lot of fur very quickly during that time. And my experience with weather in the Dakotas is, and Richard and I have gone up there several years, that there's not a forecast that's even remotely close. Well, I know we all fight the deal like, well, where did this rain come from, right? Well, up there, it gets down to a whole nother level. Like, not only where did this rain come from, but where did this snow squall come from? And Mark Steck even talks about, let me go back here to Mark, but even Mark showed us this Cadot house, an Indian res house, where he had to hole up due to a big old snow squall, and he had tracks on his UTV at the time, and finally he got the nerve up and was able to get back and run that trap line. So the first part of the year, definitely come back to me for just a moment, but the first part of the year, I will say that the first of November, generally speaking, is going to be your most friendly time to lay some steel and that type of thing. You are going to bring dry dirt. You are going to have some wet weather. I never did have a dry period, which is not like, say, eastern Colorado or western Kansas or eastern Wyoming or western Nebraska, where many times the trapping year, it's actually quite dry in many of those years, whereas up there's always seems to be some form of a moisture that's going to hit, and the temperature is and can drop very quickly. To go back to the time of year to trap, when to go, Richard and I actually went the New Year's Eve, and we had actually weather just like this. It was one of them winters that the winter never showed up, and it was Richard and I went the day we showed up. It was, the ground wasn't frozen. We left 7 days later, and we left 7 days later, and they were driving semis on the Missouri River, Grand River, for the walleye fishermen. That river was open prior to that. They said that we were trapping. It was negative 25 degrees. I have no idea what the wind chill was. I really don't. We'll get into that here in a second, but I'll show you where we stayed. But when to go, definitely the best time to have the highest quality fur, probably after November 15th. You're getting into that great fur. And I will say that they have a wonderful, beautiful coyote, and you'll see some nice coyotes in this video. But this is a campground that we actually were able to rent a spot. Richard is pulling his fifth wheel camper with he has freezers on that, and he has a freezer on it, and he has a UTV, I believe, pushed in front of that. And of course, I got my UTV and my ATV and skinning machine. And back then, I wasn't married, and I was actually bringing all of my trapping supplies, baits and lures. And as I get orders, I would actually mail those. I would mail those orders out from the Dakotas. That's kind of how I did it back then. But it takes a lot, and you need to be committed, and and you're going to end up having to deal with the weather, and you're going to have to find your place. If you're some locations I've been at, I've always asked the landowner, do you have a cowboy house that we can rent? And we've gotten that, or a deer hunting lodge where they're no longer using that. That's common for the guys who head down to Mississippi and that type of thing. Once the hunting season's done, or down into Texas and the lodge is available, the deer hunting lodge, a lot of times you can ask them and they'll let you stay in their lodge. So that's important. But up north, it's not, for lack of better words, it's not for kids. I was never more made aware of that as I was when I went up to Maine in the North Woods, where they don't measure snow in inches, right? In the North Woods of Maine, it's measured in feet. And there was a real safety concern for myself, being by myself and not knowing anybody. It's, I could call up about 20 people where I live right now, and we'll get a snowplow out to me or whatever the case is, and I'm in pretty good shape. But when you get into where we were on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, you could look it up on Google and or on Google Earth and look at the Standing Rock Indian Res. And I'm going to tell you, how you doing, Les? I'm glad to have you here, and very happy to have you here. But you can look it up and see the immense size of that. Now, we had access to as much of it as we could get to, but you don't want to be in a bad spot. I tell you how tough it is. Judith and Dan Davis, we hardly get enough snow to cover the grass. Where are you guys out of, Judith and Dan? Just let us know where you guys live. And different areas are that way, but where we stayed at it when it was negative 25 degrees, it was more of an issue for us of the cold extreme than it was of snow, actually, at the time. It was really, Richard kept the pickup running at the top of the hill. And as I show you in future pictures, you're in Mississippi. Okay. Yeah, Louisiana, but for Paul, good. Yeah, well, you guys, if you guys get a weather front, you really got something. There goes the toilet paper right out of the grocery stores and the milk. But anyway, but getting back to, Richard kept the pickup running on top of the hill, and then he would jump in the UTV with me and we would go down to the bottom of these draws. Now, in the event that we had any problem with that UTV, we pretty much ate a gasoline bill where we didn't shut anything off while we were running during the day, because it was just so darn cold at negative 25 degrees. But let's get going here. There we go. Wendigo. So we've already talked about the 1st of November. You can roll up a coyote and stick it in a Walmart bag by November 15th. That hide is so thick it may not fit in a Walmart bag. Plus, the more snow they have, the more complete snow, the more the hides bleach out and becomes an advantage to you there. Les was talking about here in Eastern Oregon, the freeze and thaw is trouble and keeps the traps working. And that brings us up, Les, to a really good place. I want to say real quick, we'll jump ahead, but we're going to talk about that. you're going to notice look at how all these coyotes, you want to try and get yourself a skinning or fur handling area. I want you to notice how much whiter these coyotes are laying down. Now, there's a brown one here in the lower front right, but if you start looking at them coyotes, how them coyotes are really starting to brighten up. They are really lighting up quite a bit. We actually were getting quite a bit of snow. That was our first year there, and they were really lighting up very nice. There is a time when finally, and we'll jump here to the next one, the weather is going to get difficult sooner or later. Now, this is a beautiful badger, and certainly with the snow, you get them snowball badgers. They really can lighten up themselves. There is a time and point, though, that we actually find out that you just can't keep your traps working anymore. We try to run them as long as we can. I think it's, the animal is alive. He isn't frozen. And it leads to easier skinning and that type of a thing. Whereas your skinned out, your snare caught coyotes will actually go ahead and, they'll be frozen by the time you get there 99% of the time. But sooner or later, the weather is going to get difficult. You are going to have to start, like you said, Les, start talking about that freeze and thaw. And the number one thing is when it does, in this part of the country, in the high plains and that type of thing. How you doing, Otter Cat? Glad to have you. Make sure you bring a lot of snares if they're legal. And I like running snares 12-inch loops, 12 inches off the ground. And if you look at that snare that's hanging, you'll see it has a kill spring on it. And I like using the Connie locks. This to me is very typical in this scenario. You see, I'm not really in heavy buckbrush. Thick. There's nothing really for me to anchor my snare onto. So you're going to need to go ahead and make sure you have, you're going to have some stakes that you can stake that snare down. And the type of a snare that I do like is a snare with a minimum length of 7 feet. And you want that coyote, once he goes down that trail, you want that snare to be able to extend all 7 feet or 10 feet down that trail. You don't want the snare actually getting kind of wrapped up in the buckbrush, acting as a shock absorber. So I'll come back to me a second, but Richard and I really had out close to 300 snares by the time we got them all out. And generally speaking, when you see these pictures of snaring opportunities, now some places you're just putting one or two due to a lack of brush or object that can kind of conceal your snare. That being said, I have caught coyotes in the wide open, just doing a snare in the wide open. But on each trail that I have sign, I actually like putting in close to 12 to 14 snares in that trail. And the way I kind of see the coyotes move is when Richard and I was running 100 traps, and they were all spread out in good trapping country, along, fence lines, crop changes, corners of the field, and things like that. Richard and I was averaging maybe 7 coyotes in a day. That'd be a great day. 5 to 7 coyotes in a day out of 100 traps. All right. When we got to snaring, and it got even colder, and what really makes a great snare line is when we have after day 3, after a big snow, and this is important, at about day 3 after a big snow, that's when we go out and start hanging snares. By then, coyotes have started getting into trails. They're letting you know where they're going. You can eliminate the trails that you don't really see sign. And then you want to hang, especially in the timber country, which I'm going to show you that, in those timber areas, wherever you got a good trail and coyotes running through it. I see many times where we've caught 6 coyotes all in that trail. So why put 14 snares in the trail to catch 6? I will say we do have coyotes that will start to enter the trail. They'll back up, or enter the snare. They'll back up, and they'll go around, and they'll get back in. And ottercat, you're right. 3 days without food, and they will cover some ground. And they're going to let you know how they're going to run through the country, and that's a big, big deal. But I love that day 3, because day 1 and 2, especially day 1, they're wandering a lot and that stuff. The snow will tell you quick if you have coyotes or no coyotes, and it may be time to move, says Les McLeod. And Les is spot on right. By God, don't hang snares where you ain't got any sign. That's another reason to wait those 3 days. It gives you a chance to make a decision. Do you want to just pull the traps that you got out and move on to snaring or not? Those are important aspects of trapping the North Plains, the Northern High Plains, and that type of thing. Or maybe you got to wait for the road graders to grade the roads. Maybe it has to get cold enough. I tell you what, in Wyoming, talk about being trapped. We had a trap line out in front of a 3-foot snow. Let me change that. Our traps were under 3 foot of snow because we set the traps along some fences. So that's on us. On that. So they got underneath. I don't think the snow was much more than 4 to 6 inches, but the winds blew. They got underneath the 3 foot of snow. But the worst thing is our dirt roads were not frozen. So it was before the snow hit, it got rain. And if you're out west, a lot of places don't actually have gravel underneath on their roads. So that type of thing. So, but getting back to the day 3. Then also understand, it's been my experience. I don't know what kind of an odor. This experience happened more in New Mexico for me than I will say in the Dakotas, but I don't really catch again where I've caught a coyote in the snow or in a snare. I've actually seen where coyotes will avoid that area. They'll go around it. They'll keep going. But they'll go around, not like a trapped coyote. It's different. I don't know if they put out a different odor. I don't know about any of that. But to have 12 to 14 snares in a line, well, now you're set up for another batch of coyotes to move through, that type of a thing. So let's go ahead and talk about bringing our snares. I will say that I'm a big fan of the T-Stake support. That has your number 9 wire, number 11 wire already welded to it. 4 very fast hanging of your snares. They do weigh quite a bit, and there are cheaper ways for you to do it. Some guys have actually taken a barn nail and welded these on. Whatever goes your way, but Pennsylvania Trapping and Outdoors. Hello, how are you doing? And he says hello to everyone watching. But the T-Stake wire support makes this ideal for making a fast snare. Understand, I'll come back to this. Your hands are going to be cold. And when you're doing a snare, I'll just use this pin here. But you know how we use the poly air tube now to go ahead as our whammy. We go to hook that into it. That thing's going to be as brittle as you can be. I mean, it's going to be hard. It's going to be cold. I had to sit there and kind of gnaw on it a little bit just to go ahead and open that thing up. Judith and Dan, very happy to have you guys. But I kind of sit there and gnaw on that to loosen it up, just so I could put that on my snare. If you look up here on the snare support, and I'll see if I can blow this up a little bit. And oh no, you don't want to do that. There we go. Let me blow this thing up if I can. I'll take it as far as I can. But that little, right underneath of the letter F in the word off, under 12 inches off the ground, that thing's going to be hard. It's going to be, it's going to be frozen. So you sometimes have to loosen that up. So I just kind of gnawing on it with my teeth a little bit. And when I go to hang that snare up. And so by having this, this wire support where you can just pound that in with your hammer very fast and easy, makes that we have about, I don't know, maybe 25 inches of wire welded onto that T-stake, and we just hammer that in the ground. But what I don't do, guys, is that T-stake's not good enough to hold a coyote or deer. I don't when they really want to get out, especially a deer, that type of a thing. Coyote, you learn the hard way, but if they were to get their leg in it or something like that, they're going to pull that T-stake right out of the ground. And so you need to have that. You need to have that you need your snares hooked up much stronger than that. Whether you go around a bigger tree, which I like that bigger tree, or I also like to have a earth anchors, a good deep earth anchor. Both of them will do it. Let's see here, Judith and Dan. Do I cut the number 9 at an angle to help getting the collar on easier? Yeah, that would help a lot. I noticed that a lot of the ones I use, they are not, but that would help to cut that at an angle. I've kind of gone to the number 11 wire a lot more than the number 9 even. I like the number, both of them work very easy, but the number 11 seem to be doing the trick anymore. They're a little trickier to weld and that type of thing. So there's Coyote Whackers here for everybody. He's on here too. Glad to have you guys. So let's go ahead and we got the wire supports. Let's look at our topography. Let's cover that. Now this is very, very common. You also, in this situation, you're going to want to live, you haven't lived until you release a half-grown elk out of a snare. I believe in that. That is something. Yeah, that would be. I've gotten deer out of them, but I have that. I wouldn't imagine what an elk would be like there. And Ottercat says Coyote Whacker, and hello Ottercat. Very good. So you're going to want to bring snare extensions. This is typical. This is a great snaring location, guys. This is a great snaring location. There's opportunity here for you to hang a snare, but most snares are not going to make it from that tree. If you're going to tie on to any of those trees, the snare your 7 foot to 10 foot of snare is going to be used up. So you're going to need to carry with you some extensions. Whether you make 10-foot extensions or whatever you need, maybe go with 10-foot extensions and 5-foot extensions, stuff like that, to kind of help yourself out. And for the record, snare extensions, in my experience, they are the reusable. I've rarely do I have snare extensions that I can't reuse. It's the snare, it's a one-time use, but that's typical what I see there. But this is typical for the high North Plains or situations like it. You might find where coyotes are actually dropping down in the bottom, and obviously cats may be going down there as well. But certainly on that trail, There's several opportunities, and let the tracks tell you how many snares you want to hang down this. Now, this trail right here that we're looking at, I'm probably not going to be. I'm not going to be using. I think I use 285-pound breakaways is what I'm using on mine. But I tell you, some of those breakaways don't, as Les could tell you, they probably don't break away. It's a nice. It makes you feel better than sometimes they actually do. I don't mean it bad, but I've had some that were still pretty tight on there, and I think they were put on there properly and everything, not overdone. But yeah, 285-pound breakaways is usually what I got on mine there. And if you guys use anything different, let us know here in the comment section. But this spot here is worth one or two snares. If there's more tracks, then by all means, set it. I like the fact it's a nice low draw. They're going to tell you where, the tracks will tell you. And you just need to walk down and set it. But this is the type of a country that this thick cover, and these lower draws like this, when I find trails going through them, typically speaking, I really see where coyotes will go down into the draws in these, they're going to run down. How you doing, Mike? I'm very happy. Mike seldom fails is with us, folks. But I typically see coyotes go down in the bottom of these draws that are when the weather turns really bad and really cold and that type of thing. So that's why I hang so many snares in that type of a country. 12 to 14 snares is definitely something I'm going to want to carry with it on there. And another thing is it hides the fur from eagles. Now look at this fine coyote, beautiful white coyote, but this coyote was actually caught on a trail that led down into that draw that you're looking at behind you. But the eagles got in it, and I tell you, they'll start eating on them bellies. And if we could get the coyotes to die, laying with their belly down, I think we'd save more food and all of that. So Les says he sure enjoys Mike's videos, and David, I thank you very much I'm glad you guys are. David, I'm glad that you enjoyed the videos as well. But that's why you don't want to be having too many snares out in the open, because them eagles will find it. Not that they won't find it in this thick cover, and they will, but the eagles are a real issue, and I tell you, there's not a damn thing you could do about it. But there's nothing you can do about it. They are going to be. You won't find an eagle around anywhere, and all of a sudden, boom! There's the issue right there. So, what you hope for? Have been sent pictures of 3 wolves caught on it this season. Well, I'll be dang. They've been caught by snares, Dan and Judith. I'll be dang. Well, this is what you really want to see is for you to set tracks, get a fresh snow, and see that one set of tracks go down. And Richard Johnson here, folks, this is what you want to do. You notice how he picked out the perfect pinch point. And this is the kind of thing that you want to set when you're in this kind of country. Now, a lot of people think, well, you're always snaring in just really nice thick country, but that's the main thing is you want to set up your snares so basically Richard set this up, and then he continued walking on down, and he continued looking for pinch points just like this, and you want to keep working and working and working in it. So I'm happy that Caster Lure's working in T-bone sets. That's awesome. So that's this type of a country. Now this here probably would fit just about any type of a Midwestern type of ground that I've ever been in. You notice it's pretty much wide open, isn't it, folks? And you say, well, how are you going to snare in that kind of country? Well, this is kind of the type of ground that I've set in the high plains for snares and this type of thing. You're going to get, this type of a trail is just perfect. Boy, and I said trails that catch your eye. You can see here where Richard, you're going to set multiple trails. As long as you got sign in here, you're going to set multiple trails through this level. Now, there's a trail where Richard is standing, and if you look to the left, there's a lower trail down below that. So there's a lot of times a trail like these are running vertically from the way we're looking at it. But you're also going to want to look for those snares or them trails that's running horizontally coming out of those ditches as well. There's just they just vary from place to place. This particular bottom creek draw, and this is somewhat of a dry creek. I wish I could put us on Google Earth here behind the video behind Richard down there. But that would be something there that Richard and I are we found a way to get down into it and into the bottom. And Richard basically, I'm going to tell you right now, Richard walked and carried about 8 snares to the right, and I walked and carried 8 snares to the left. And that's kind of how we shared responsibility in it. Cattle trails along fences, by all means. And I wish I got a perfect spot photograph of that, but I doubt I should have grabbed it for the sake of this. But I think let's see here. We'll see if we can find an example that somewhat does that. But anywhere you got the coyote tracks, you definitely want to set it. The number one thing I will say, the thing you worry about cattle trails along and fences is like if it's barbed wire, you're going to get you're going to poke some fur and some, holes in the fur. But you know what? If that's what you got, that's what you got. That's what you got to deal with. This day here. And we actually trapped this coyote, so that's why I'm able to skin this coyote on the trap line. It had warmed up that day to negative 15 degrees, and it's amazing how that's the Grand River that we're looking at, it's looking to the other side of the river there from the Grand River, and you could see the treeless landscape that we're looking at. But I guess what I'm saying is it was still, even though it felt warm enough that I went ahead and skinned that coyote right then and there. And remember, Richard's vehicle is on top of the hill. So as soon as I killed the coyote, I started skinning it. By the time I got down to the shoulders, he was already freezing up. And by the time I got to the head was already frozen. So at negative 25, I tell you what, I can skin a coyote in about 5 to 7 minutes, generally speaking, if it pulls pretty good. But even in that cold, I was already dealing with the frozen head. And your choice is going to either be where you can, if you catch them live, try to get them skinned out before they freeze. Notice the light color of that coyote. Look at the beauty part of this. This would have been caught in 1st of January, right after New Year's down there. And you could see just the fur density in that coyote. And here's another day where we have the snared coyotes. And you notice how they're all frozen. Well, Richard and I are going to have to get them in some heat in order for us to thaw them out. So you're going to start accruing that. Richard and I don't know if I finished my story or not, but we were averaging 5 to 7 coyotes a day when we were trapping them. But we went to snaring them and we started catching as many as 12 to 14 coyotes a day. They really like running those bottom draws, and it really focused. It got out of all that. If we go back here to that big wide open country that's kind of behind me, that all of a sudden they left the open fields, they left the pastures, they left the cornfields, and they started just focusing in the bottom of those draws down in those right along in the bottom of these nice buckbrush. They started focusing all of their attention in those areas, which meant that our farm fields was less and less valuable they just concentrated themselves down here. The secret to this became an issue of how many coyotes or how many snares can we hang up and run in a day, and that's and you're right there, Les. Be careful putting the dead coyote on a metal pickup bed; they'll freeze down and will break the guard here. You're right, and we actually have some cardboard on top of that up there, just for the record, because you're right, they will freeze down, and they'll you're gonna want to stick it in some. You're gonna want to stick some cardboard or something that you can carry with you when you get into it. This is the last day of our line. I think you can see how much whiter the coyotes have gotten. These were all snared. They're all frozen. I did get myself a bobcat here, and that's why you see that bobcat carcass also in there, and he was froze up pretty good. But it's going to boil down to is we'll let the coyotes thaw out on the way home, and I think we took 14 coyotes on our last check out there. But there is a big difference from that coyote right there to the coyotes that you see here in this photo right there, how they're quite a bit browner in the early stages of trapping. But the reason you want to go to the high plains is because you're starting to get into coyotes that are much more of a higher quality, a higher fur density, longer guard hairs, and that type of a thing. It makes a big difference. I'll come back to me here before we wrap things up, but I know Mike Fails up there in Michigan. Mike, I think you could probably tell me that. I think you probably have a very heavy hide, is what I'm guessing, that where you're at in Michigan, that you have a heavy hide. But because of all of your cover and your trees and your things like that, I think that's the reason why you want to go to the high plains. One of the advantages of going to the high plains is you can get the quality of fur in the terms of color and that type of a thing. Les, I'm glad you do enjoy the live sessions, and and I thank you very much. And Les says that you did. Where did I thaw? Okay, Seth, where did we thaw out the coyotes when it was 25 below? Now that I'm going to tell you where we thawed them out, and that Dutchman camper right there, that's Richard's camper. We had three electric parlor heaters going. We had the propane hooked up, propane furnace, and we'd bring those coyotes in at night. And we had them in plastic bags, and we set them on the floor there. And the next morning we'd be bringing them out and thaw, and we'd start start skinning them out and that type of a thing. That was the honest truth there. The early part of the season, where we had a skinning shed in there, that wasn't so bad because we were still somewhat in the 50s during the day and 25 at night and that type of a thing. But that was that. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, that's what. That's where we end up. That's where we. That's where we actually done it. We had them plastic bags all over the place in there and having to step on it. But I tell you, it was a lot of fun when you're starting to get catches just like this, and that was just beautiful coyotes. And we, of course, just said we're gonna just take them home with us for the day and that type of thing. I'm gonna go so far as to say this. Unless you brought this up earlier, the fact is it when it was negative 25 and it just stayed cold, I didn't experience the fur clipping really from the coyotes in the snow. For those of you that are going to watch this that are up in Canada or in these northern environments, where I seem to find problems of the coyote fur getting clipped, just like you're talking about your as long as that snow was really frozen, and the coyotes, it was just that cold in that fluffy snow, that coyote fur stayed beautiful in there. And if we look at this last day of fur, you see that the fur really does not look like it's breaking at all. And yeah, Seldom says heavy cover breaks the shoulder and flank guard hairs quickly. I seem to have more problem with the guard hairs breaking, actually, when I'm talking more like a slushy days. You get into these days like the first, like when we get into this type of a scenario, let's just say that was a wet, slushy coyote and it was freezing at night and that type of a deal. That's when all of a sudden a lot of the fur quality went to hell in a handbasket and that type of a thing. But that was the worst deal on it. My last thoughts, and that was the year that Richard and I did this. We were at Gronwald, and that was, I know the picture's fuzzy there, but that had our Dakota coyotes in that pile in New Mexico and western Kansas. It was a lot. Well, I appreciate it, Mark. I'm glad you're enjoying the presentation. But let me say this. Be prepared for flat tires. I can't emphasize that enough. I can't emphasize having a tire available on top of, don't put yourself in a position to where you got to try to pull out a tire from underneath of your truck and it's already slush, it's frozen. Carry some plugs with you. Carry an air compressor that you can plug into your ATV, into your cigarette lighter type of a thing. I don't know why we call it a cigarette lighter, but that's what, I don't think anybody has cigarette lighters anymore. But you know what I'm talking about. And but be prepared for that. Carry gasoline or diesel, whatever it is you need. Carry that gasoline or diesel with you. And when you get into there, I'm going to come back to talk to you. I can't emphasize the importance of that out west. The number of times that we have bottled water with you. There's not a thing called too many gloves, too many clothes left in the vehicle that's dry. All of these things should make a difference for you. And when you get out further west and you get in the northwest, I'm telling you, if you look at the Google map of the Standing Rock Indian Res, I'm telling you, we were 25, 30 miles from anybody, much of the time. I don't know how long it would take it for us under that type of negative 25 conditions, you know what I mean, to get out of there. The cell phones, I'm gonna tell you right now, the only place you could really talk is on the top of certain hills. And for those of you that have that type of thing, Paul, I'm glad you were here, Paul. Glad to have you. The problem is you get on top of the hill, the one hill that you can get a phone signal to make it to Mobridge, South Dakota. Maybe you can get lucky and you can catch that tower. You have seconds in order to talk because your phone is dying the second it's exposed to that air. And I'm not kidding you. Richard had, I'm glad Dan and Judith, you guys enjoying the presentation, but Richard actually had his phone on the charger, sitting on the counter, had also a glass of ice water. Actually, I take it back, had a glass of water sitting on the counter from the supper that we had the night before. We woke up with all the heaters going. Remember, I got 3 electric heaters, and we had the propane heater. And he woke up and his phone was still dead. And it was because of the extreme temperature that it couldn't keep up. You know that these electric vehicles ain't going to make it up in these environments. The way I got around it, for the 5 minutes to snap a photograph like I just showed of me standing here of dealing with the catch, that was actually in my pocket, and I snapped the photograph, and within a minute, that phone's dying. That's how, in the same way with something like that, is you keep it in your inner layer. I can't tell you how many layers that Richard and I was wearing on those days, but you actually, when I charged up my phone, I actually had it underneath of the covers. I had it underneath the covers with me and at bed at night. And the way I look at it, my wife is a quilter, and I'd put 4 quilts underneath of me and 4 quilts over me. I had my boots off, but I pretty much still was wearing my Carhartts and the whole 9 yards. That was the extreme cold and everything, but it was manageable. It was doable. It was just more of a prevention than anything, and it was just flat out cold out. That's all there was to it. But I don't expect most folks are going to have to deal with that. But let's look at it from the other side of the coin. You know, you got to be prepared for such a thing. You got to have the money to buy heat for such an event, that type of a thing. Having a wood burner in one corner of a building and you staying in it, you got to remember you're probably going to want to sleep next to the wood burner in those environments and things like that. There's always those little tricks to you got to deal with. So definitely think about that. The last thing I wrote on here is talk to everyone. And I mean talk to everyone. Take the time to visit. Take the time to visit with the landowner, the rancher. Try to touch base with them and ask them, do you have any new dead cows? Do you have anything? Do you know of anything that's changed? Always get new trapping ground. If a guy's, when you go to the grocery store and say if you notice you think there's a rancher or somebody like that, tell them what you're doing and try to get some more land or something like that. You can add more property quickly to yourself, but find out where guys are catching. I can't tell you the number of trappers that I shake hands with at the gas station. They either recognize me or maybe they don't recognize me, but they certainly do recognize. They certainly do recognize when they see a rig that looks like this with a skinning pole, and they see traps in the back of your truck and things like that. They certainly do know what you're doing and that type of a thing. But in summary, I'll answer any questions that may pop up here, but we'll quickly go over the top of everything. very fast, and we'll wrap things up. But definitely get permission and try to, trespassing is personal. I think it's good to be able to trap with a good partner or something like that when you're in that type of country. What kind of antifreeze do you do when we were running footholds? We had waxed dirt with us mixed with peat moss, is what we had. And you look at some of my old videos. If you go back and look at our videos, you'll see I'm using a 9-pound splitting maul. And that was chopping out my trap bed and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's kind of what we do. Yeah, wax dirt's what you got. I'm going to say that the reason, I don't do well with wax dirt because of my odors around my place. And I use a lot of dry dirt. Up there, we did use wax dirt. But I don't really get the avoidance. If I try to use wax dirt where I live here in eastern Kansas, I get avoidance, and I think it's because they smell it. They smell what the wax is absorbed. That being said, when it was -15, -25, they didn't notice it, and it's the same dirt that they were avoiding in Kansas. So, I think there's something to that. So having a friend, make sure you got a good working vehicles. Best time to go is, of course, the earlier part of the year. It's easier for you to go out there and trap with limited amount of waxed dirt, dry dirt. Maybe the ground won't even be frozen yet. It'll be a little easier. It'll be definitely easier for you to trap, that type of thing. But the quality of fur gets better as the weather gets tougher. And again, you're going to want to be prepared for when that day shows up that your traps are going to be almost impossible for them to keep going, that type of a thing. So you're going to want to go ahead, bring those snares, bring your foothold. Les buys calcium chloride by the bag at his tire store. That's a good point. You can use that calcium chloride. You just wash it off, don't you, Les? As soon as your trapping season's done, you quickly wash that stuff off, I would imagine. But anyway, yeah, you want to go in. We carried about 300 snares for our trapping trip. Obviously, we didn't catch 300 coyotes. I think we came out with about 110 coyotes off of that trip that we were on. Think of the fastest way for you to actually stake your trap in, and also go ahead and Les says he just washes it off as soon as he's done. But go ahead here and use make it fast. Come up with a system that you can quickly get snare supports. Remember, your hands are going to can be wet, they can be cold, so make it something that's fast and easily for you to work with, so you can lay as many snares as you can. Topography is going to vary, but you want to take advantage of as many of them, and as I indicated by this photograph, you're going to want to carry some snare supports or snare extensions in addition to actually having snares. Because if you're going to tie off to those trees that are beside the trail there, you're going to need to have an additional 5 to 10 feet. And that's a very good, those trees are perfect to tie off into. So they're perfect for that. The thick cover areas, coyotes, when it gets cold, they always want to go into the thick cover. They always want to go low. So you're going to want to look in after day 3. After a snow, you're going to want to look in those bottom draws and start finding trails coyotes are going to want to use. Let me come back to me when it comes in bottom draws. Also, you're going to figure out which draws are going to want to snow in, right? There's certain draws or gullies or erosions or coulees that if you put your snares in there, you're going to have 10 feet of snow on top. So you're going to want to know your area of the best areas for them to do. Have I ever set 2 snares side by side in a wider trail? I haven't done that. I have narrowed up the trail And carry us some clippers, and where you can clip some brush and narrow that trail up. That's a trick that I do. And then I take my, well, we can take this. I can take that T-bar, pound a hole in the ground, and then I can stick my twig or my brush or my cedar tree in that to narrow the trail up. I've done that quite a bit. So definitely narrow the trail up. The same thing also applies for, say you got a trail going underneath of a fence. What I'll do is I'll find an old fence post or a log, a dead limb, and I just have some old number 14 wire with me, and I'll actually hang. Say I have a trail going underneath of the fence, but there's 3 foot between the bottom wire of the fence and the trail. I'll actually drop down a log that will actually sit just above. That I'll have it right above my snare support. In other words, I want the coyote to duck their head to go through my snare. So I'll actually, use that number 14 wire and hang that off of it. So that's another little tool. You always want to bring lots of wire, things like that. Best time to go is, of course, when you can, but the fur quality gets better after November 15th. Where to stay, you're going to want to line that up. Try to talk to the landowner and see if he's got a cowboy building. In other words, a place where the cowboys stay in the summertime, or hired help, or talk to a deer hunting lodge and see if you could stay in one of their guide rooms, where the guides stay or something like that. Whatever you can do to avoid having to bring that camper, that's for sure. I can't emphasize the importance of having a skinning shed, if possible. Some place for you to get yourself out of the weather and do your skinning and that type of a thing. You are gonna have to be prepared for the weather. Bring your snares, as I said. Let's continue on. Fast wire supports. Topography is going to vary from place to place, but this is typical. This is a very good spot to hang snares, as well as this is even better that I see. Keep yourself out of the open country if you have eagles in your country. Now, these are actually golden eagles that were doing this damage right here. And just to let you know, these were golden eagles. And you didn't see many of them. You didn't really find that. We didn't even scare a golden eagle off of this. He was already gone by the time we got there. They probably heard us come in and drive it in and took off. This is very typical. Hang again, like this bottom draw here. We would have had 12 to 14 snares in this bottom little creek bottom, this little stream. Back where I'm from, we call them a branch. But we'll walk, I go one way and Richard goes the other. This is very typical buckbrush. This is ideal snaring country. If you going on these trips, try just, you just deal with the catch one way or the other. And, enjoy your time while you're there. These were harvested that morning, and you can see, even though I harvested these all in the snow and all that, you can see how nice and dry they all look and everything. Nothing was froze down to the ground and that type of a thing. But guys, I really had a good time talking to everybody. I'm very happy you guys showed up. Thank you for coming. And if you guys haven't subscribed, do me a favor, click the like button and subscribe, or share this onto your own Facebook. So thanks a lot, folks. And until we meet again, tight chains.